a nice introduction. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to interact with everyone. Thank you, Selvam sir, for coordinating this. It's a great effort. And I think it's a very relevant topic at this time. Uh, it's lockdown time for everyone, staying away. We cannot see each other, and we are conducting all these kind of lectures. And it's a great initiative by Manipal College of Health Professional to conduct a webinar on such an important topic. And probably all the participants know about me very well. My specialty is cardiorespiratory physiotherapy, but unfortunately, I lost this clinical touch. I've not been doing much in the clinical area. So what I'm doing is just lecturing. So about today, it's important for me to say that what I'm going to share today is not my clinical experience. Is what I'm going to share is about the thoughts, and I've gone through the literature, the review, and what I found in the literature, what can be done from physiotherapy perspective for patients with COVID-19. Okay, the topic today is respiratory physiotherapy for SARS-CoV-19 patients who are affected with COVID-2 virus. And what we're going to do is review of all current practices. The main objectives of this webinar is to summarize the global scenario and challenges ahead for physiotherapy workforce. We're going to see the statistics, how badly it is affecting people around the world, and the statistics about the complications that it is causing, how many cases are affected with the lung complications. We're going to discuss briefly about the common respiratory manifestations and complications, mainly ARDS, the major complication. And we'll also review the current physiotherapy practice guidelines and whether there is any consensus on key issues, how to handle such cases with respiratory symptoms. So let's begin with the situation report. As we all know, every one of us are well aware of the current situation now. The global scenario, almost 4 million cases are there right now. These are confirmed cases. We don't know how many are undetected, undiagnosed cases are there. And totally it has accounted for about 300,000 deaths already. And many cases are because of respiratory complications. And mainly the deaths are seen mostly in elderly population. And even in India, the number is increasing. There are clusters of cases everywhere. And it's been like more than 50 days now. All are suffering with this pandemic spreading everywhere. And how different it is from a regular flu. Generally, a regular flu affects in an average 1.3 people, okay, by droplet infection or spread. One affects 1.3 in an average, whereas COVID-19 can spread more vigorously. It can affect 2 to 2.5 people in an average. And what is strange about this particular infection is that the number of days of incubation. With a normal flu virus, it's usually 1 to 4 days, whereas when it comes to COVID-19, it's about 2 to 14 days. The symptoms may appear even 14 days after the droplet infection, once it enters into the body. So it's very difficult to identify a person. Before a person is identified, he has already contacted many people, and the spread of infection has already occurred within the family or whoever he has contacted. And it's more serious infection. Generally, with flu, only 2% of people get hospitalized, whereas with COVID-19, about 19% are getting hospitalized. It's all because of severe inflammatory response that it is causing, severe respiratory symptoms it is causing, and the death rate, the mortality rate is also very high. It's about 1 to 3.4%. Okay. So as we see the projections, more and more number of people can get affected, and we don't know whether the vaccine will come out and how long it will take for a vaccine to come out, and when this coronavirus can be completely eliminated. So we can expect to see an increase in number of cases, an increase in number of respiratory infections because of COVID-19. Coming to the symptoms, it starts with an upper respiratory infection generally. May start as a sore throat, dry cough, and about 80% of people, it stops there. Once they are identified with sore throat, it may not go into the lower respiratory tract, it may not cause a serious pneumonia. The remaining people who are elderly may have a lower respiratory tract infection, which can cause pneumonia. In some severe cases, it can also lead to acute respiratory distress syndrome. So it can also cause hematogenic spread. It may enter into the blood by day 8 to 15, and it can lead to septic shock. There are several people who also died because of sepsis. Generally, when we look at the clinical presentation, in 98% of the cases, we see them having fever. 76% of the people who are affected with COVID-19, the confirmed cases present with cough, myalgia about 18%, fatigueness is seen in 18%, and other immune response related problems is observed. Leukopenia, lymphopenia, all these are observed. And kidney complications are also seen in many people. So the investigations include the chest CT, virological examinations, hemogram to identify this. So let's go more specific to our topic about the respiratory problems. The respiratory problems usually begin after 1 week once the virus enters. The symptoms may appear as dry cough if the patient is identified very early, the right time. Certainly, lower respiratory tract infection can be prevented if proper care is taken. And in elderly people, probably it may not, even if it is identified in the early stages. Once it enters into day 8, patient may have severe respiratory complications. As the virus enters into the lung, it damages the alveoli. We're going to discuss a little more about how it damages alveoli and how it causes severe respiratory complications. By usually day 12, fever usually subsides, but the cough and respiratory symptoms may continue. So in an average, about 18 to 21 days, the symptoms become more and more severe. Those who are admitted in intensive care units, who are put on mechanical ventilator as the respiratory symptoms worse, they may die because of severe respiratory failure. So mostly people die an average about 18.5 days. And during this period, several medications have been tried. There is no right treatment. Several antiviral medications, anti-malarial medications have been tried. Still, they're continuing to give the same medications as a proper, correct medication has not been identified. So generally, the viral response is divided into 3 phases. In stage 1, early infection, patient has only fever, dry cough, may have diarrhea, headache, and may have some clinical signs related to lymphopenia, increased prothrombin time, all this. And these potential therapies are being tried. now. Remdesivir is recently tried in many cases and it's been found very effective. Hydrochloroquine also have been tried. Uh, some countries, they say they have been successful with these medications. And later in the second stage, it goes into pulmonary phase. Now the symptoms worsen, becomes more serious. Later on, it becomes hyperinflammation stage. Here is the stage where the inflammation becomes very severe and patient may have ARDS, cardiac failure, and elevated inflammatory markers. So these inflammatory markers, CRP, LDH, interleukin 6, when the inflammation becomes accelerated, it rapidly damages the organs, and this is termed as cytokine storm. It's become very important to understand about this cytokine storm when we talk about COVID-19. Cytokine storm, also referred to hyperinflammatory syndrome. Here, as the virus enters, the inflammatory process sets in and patient will have unremitting fever, severe spikes of fever, which is commonly observed in these cases, and pulmonary sequelae, mainly ARDS, pneumonia. And in the lab investigations, it's been revealed high interleukins, high ferritin values, all this. So theoretically, it's controlling this immune response is important. They have been trying out. There was one recent news where learned about using the plasma cells, antibodies that have been developed as part of inhalation therapy to kill the virus that is within the lung. That has been tried and recently patented. But none of these therapies have been proved by research clinically. There are, the basic level studies, the phase 1 or phase 2 trials that have been going on, and it is yet to come out the proper therapy, how to control this inflammatory response. But COVID-19 mainly causes severe inflammatory response. That is something important to understand. And this inflammatory response is mainly to be blamed for causing severe lung damage. What happens inside the lung is that as the virus enters the lung, as we know very well, when a bacteria or any foreign body enters, this macrophage response increases, and these cells which are there, the mucus producing cells get inflamed more and more. Mucus is produced, and after the ciliary movement is also impeded as it becomes more dry. More and more mucus as it gets, the phlegm gets obstructed. Secondarily, the fluid that is in the capillaries may get absorbed into the lungs and the alveoli gets infiltrated. So we see severe pulmonary infiltrates everywhere within the lung. And apart from these pulmonary infiltrates, the extravasation of fluid, the fluid coming into the lung causes severe pulmonary edema. And what happens with COVID-19 is pneumonia. It can be exudative consolidation, and then later on, severe respiratory distress syndrome due to pulmonary edema. So physiotherapists are mainly concerned about treating these two stages. Initial dry cough, when it is only causing upper respiratory tract damage, there is nothing for us to do when a patient is having dry cough. When a patient is having exudative phase, consolidation, which we can identify in X-ray, there is something for us to do in the later stage. And when a patient is on ventilator with ARDS, again, there is something for us to do. So apart from pneumonia and ARDS, we also see that alveolar capillary membrane is severely damaged. Even after virus is completely cleared from the lungs, it has already left some permanent scarring within the lung. The alveolar capillary membrane is permanently damaged, causing hypoxia. So patient has severe hypoxemia. Even later after recovery, it may take about 9 weeks or 12 weeks. Patient has completely recovered, the pulmonary rehabilitation, even as a long-term care. So we need to think about, long-term goals for this patient. Those even who recover, what we call as COVID-19 survivors, they also require long-term respiratory care. So physiotherapy is essential and very important for all those patients who are affected with COVID-19, and particularly those patients who develop respiratory problems, who develop severe respiratory manifestations such as consolidation, ARDS, those who were on mechanical ventilator for prolonged period of time. All these patients require physiotherapy and pulmonary rehabilitation. As we see the major respiratory complications in these patients, it causes type 1 respiratory failure. Why it causes type 1 respiratory failure? Because it damages alveolar capillary membrane, hypoxemia. So patient has reduced oxygenation to the blood, causing type 1 respiratory failure. So in early stages, it can be treated with oxygen therapy, non-invasive ventilation. We play a very important role in giving non-invasive ventilation for the patient. If a patient develops exudative pneumonia, as it becomes more and more severe, chest physiotherapy is important. We treat pneumonia when it is in exudative phase, when there is consolidation. We give chest physiotherapy. But when it comes to COVID-19, as it is rapidly spreading droplet infection, we need to be extremely cautious. More and more health professionals can get affected. So chest physiotherapy should be used cautiously. So they've not recommended on very early stage giving chest physiotherapy for the patients. Mostly medicines have been tried. And the next problem is about ARDS. When a patient is on mechanical ventilator, when there is severe pulmonary edema, the patient is desaturating rapidly. He requires, prone position. Prone position is highly recommended to deal with this ARDS, which is used more frequently in many cases across the globe for treating COVID-19 patients who are having ARDS and superinfection. The virus damages the lung and it can cause other bacterial infections. So COVID-19 might not have caused severe respiratory damage, but the superinfection which causes because of the immune response, then later bacteria damaging the lung. Patient may have superinfection, so we got to treat superinfections also if it is identified in the right time. And the interstitial lung damage, as we discussed, permanent scarring that is there in the lung. So it may cause reduced chest expansion. So to deal with this, we have a variety of techniques that we use called as lung expansion therapy techniques to improve oxygenation. Let's look at the images that we have, COVID-19 patients. It is like any other case where you have pulmonary edema. What we see is ground glass appearance when there is severe damage within the lung. It depends upon the severity of damage within the lung. So, but the amount of damage that occurs in the lung, as they say, it's more severe in cases with COVID-19 compared to other cases where, other viral pneumonias, when they compare the severity of damage, as they see in CT, X-ray, is very severe and more extensive, most part of the lung getting affected. And this is the only way to look at the severity of damage within the lung, and the most commonly used is PF ratios. Probably we all know how to use this PF ratio for the treatment purpose. We'll discuss separately about that, those who do not understand what is this PF ratio. When we talk about comorbidities, now it is clear for us that an youngster who is not having any disease carries less risk of ARDS, and also the mortality rate is very less in younger population. And there are certain comorbidities which have been identified, which increases the mortality rate, which increases the risk of severe respiratory complications. So the major comorbidities are hypertension, any heart disease, pre-existing heart condition, diabetes, cancer, COPD, any pre-existing lung condition, even bronchial asthma, may increase the risk of severe respiratory complications, and also high mortality rate has been observed in these comorbidities. So we need to be cautious about when a patient is having comorbidity. Even from physiotherapy point of view, more vigorous monitoring is required when a patient is having these complications, particularly if you're planning to give positioning. If a patient is already hypertensive, patient may have accelerated blood pressure response, so which can limit our treatment strategies. So vigorous physiotherapy techniques may not be applied in such cases who are having comorbidities already. Okay, as we know that physiotherapy services, uh, all the health services have been divided now. All the hospitals have separate COVID units. In any case, what we see with long-term immobilization, we find them having several uh, cardiovascular complications as well because of immobilization, like pressure sores. So apart from respiratory complications, we have got to deal with that as well. So early mobilization protocol is uh, what is recommended, but unfortunately early mobilization cannot be given for patients with COVID-19 because of rate of spread of these infections, how fast they can spread the infections. And as I told you, physios cannot treat these patients several times in a day because of limited availability of resources. And there is high risk of contracting the infections. Those who are having COVID-19, they require early mobilization protocol when they are in ICU. They will certainly get benefited. But again, because of limitation within the resources, we are not being able to provide best of our services here. Okay, something important to know is about the scale that they have introduced to handle these cases, called Brescia COVID-19 respiratory severity scale. And this severity scale is very useful in planning the treatment, and for even physiotherapists, it's a very useful tool at different stages. Okay, this protocol uses a testing criteria, and based on the criteria 0, 1, 2, 3, the treatment protocols have been recommended. And generally, based on the severity, who requires ventilator support, who requires non-invasive ventilatory support. We know that once a patient is on invasive ventilator support, it is very difficult to wean. So it's always better to try non-invasive ventilator for moderate cases and milder cases with oxygen therapy. So mild to moderate cases generally with non-invasive ventilation and good physiotherapy may get benefited. We can avoid, uh, mechanical ventilator support, such things. So this is a quite useful scale which can be used to plan the treatment. So based on the scale, based on the severity, have 0 to 8, it's recommended ambient air, no need of oxygen therapy for grade 0. 1 requires oxygen therapy. A patient who is having respiratory rate more than 20 with staccato speech, with they're not able to count rapidly up to 20 after taking a deep breath, uh, graded as 2, and for these patients, the treatment initiated is oxygen therapy. And high frequency nasal ventilation is given for patients with grade 3. And for patients who are having PF ratios more than 150 mmHg, as you can see, PF ratio refers to ratio of partial pressure of oxygen in arterial blood, and it is uh, divided by the fraction of oxygen in inhaled air. Probably the cardiorespiratory physiotherapists and the postgraduate students may know very well about this PF ratio. For other students who do not know about this, PaO2 refers to partial pressure of oxygen in arterial blood. In a ABG sample, you get it. And FiO2 is the fraction of oxygen that you are using in inhaled air. If this ratio is more than 150 mmHg, this particular ratio is very important in all patients with ARDS. Even for COVID-19 patients, this ratio is used as guideline for planning the treatment. And for severe cases with PaO2 by FiO2 ratio less than 150 mmHg, prone position and extracorporeal therapy is recommended. So there are several algorithms that have been introduced. There are several guidelines. So as we know, because of lockdown, those who are not practicing directly and those who have time, they have written so many reviews, and it's important, at this time. Um and all these guidelines, as we go through, some are very useful, as we can see. Particularly the guidelines given by Australian Association, I found very important, and these guidelines can be highly recommended for practice. And this particular algorithm that I found, it was published by Oman physiotherapists, and they have given some guidelines for patients who get admitted during, uh, for the regular in the hospitals. They found that the positive cases, how they should be handled when they're conscious, when they're unconscious. They've given some general guidelines. These guidelines may be useful if you're practicing in a hospital where you find that you have regular cases and you have COVID cases as well, COVID and non-COVID cases, how they can be handled as a team, how you can approach and how you can plan out the treatment. This algorithm may be useful. And the second, this particular table that I found in a journal, I think this is from Italian Association, what they have given some important recommendations. These recommendations are very useful. According to them, a patient who is having mild symptoms without significant respiratory compromise is only having fever, dry cough, there are no chest X-ray changes. In such cases, physiotherapy intervention is not recommended. Even in many cases, physiotherapists are involved in taking sputum samples. Sometimes they're involved in even taking nasal swabs. Okay, so it's highly recommended that it's better to avoid, as we have limited resources, we are limited in number. To handle such cases, it's better not to, mostly in some of the recommendations, they mentioned that it's better not to be involved in and not to treat mild cases without significant respiratory compromise. And the patients who are having pneumonia, those who are having exudative pneumonia features, these patients are recommended to take low-level oxygen requirement. So these patients who are having non-productive cough, they only require oxygen therapy. Again, these cases, those who are having pneumonia with dry cough, physiotherapy interventions are not indicated for airway clearance or sputum samples. For a patient who is having pneumonic consolidation, there is exudative feature, and at the same time he is having some comorbidities. There is neuromuscular comorbidity, spinal cord injury, or he's already having pre-existing lung condition, someone having bronchiectasis, COPD. In such cases, they may have excess mucus production, and these patients require chest physiotherapy. If patient is having already a coexisting condition, it's better to treat these cases. And a patient who is having severe pneumonic feature with weak ineffective cough, again, these patients require chest physiotherapy. For a patient who is having weak ineffective cough, it's highly recommended to use mechanical insufflator exsufflator device. Any of these devices can be very useful to clear the secretions from the lungs. So as part of general guidelines for patients who are having ARDS features, pulmonary edema, hypoxemic respiratory failure, and the chest X-ray shows ground glass appearance. In such cases, they recommend using recruitment maneuvers. It depends on case by case basis. The recruitment maneuvers refer to, sometimes changing the ventilator settings. In the presence of respiratory therapists, it is usually done by respiratory therapists. Not all hospitals have respiratory therapists practicing there. In such case, physiotherapists can do this recruitment maneuvers, and ventilatory strategies can be used, such as changing the PEEP, changing the time for inhalation, changing the IE ratios. Okay, some of these strategies are recommended. For patients with ARDS, particularly high PEEP is recommended. These ventilator strategies can certainly help in improving oxygenation in cases, and the recovery process may improve. So recruitment maneuvers are highly recommended for patients with ARDS, as recommended by Australian Physiotherapy Association. The treatment guidelines, what I'm showing here in the slides, is from Australian Association. They have given these guidelines in a review paper that I found, and they also recommend prone positioning. Mostly the prone position is recommended for many patients. COVID-19 patients have got benefited, many patients. Those who are having ARDS, the prone position was quite successful in many cases, although there is no clinical evidence in terms of randomized clinical trials. Okay, we still have to wait and see the exact evidence. It may take some time for to get a strong evidence about use of prone positioning in patients with COVID-19 ARDS, COVID-19 SARS futures. In adult patients with COVID-19 and severe ARDS, prone ventilation is generally recommended for 12 to 16 hours per day. So it requires sufficient human resources and expertise to be safely performed. And this expert is physiotherapist to prevent known complications. Sometimes you may use modified prone positions, quarter prone, okay, abdomen free prone position like this. So all these modified prone positions can be tried out, and this can be beneficial for the patients. It can be tried if a patient is not having major cardiac complications such as arrhythmias. So whenever we are giving prone position, we have to be extremely conscious about cardiac complications that can occur, and continuous monitoring may be required to look for any major complications that could occur. And closed inline suction catheters are recommended. We follow this protocol in most of the hospitals. When a patient is having severe infection, closed inline suctioning is recommended. It's obviously to avoid spread of infections. If you use open suctioning, there are chances of secretions spilling out, and the droplet infection can spread. To avoid spread of infections, it's always better to use closed suctioning method. And any disconnection of patient should be avoided. The patients may be dependent on PEEP. So aerosolization and the droplet spread of infections, high probability is there whenever you disconnect the patient. So disconnecting the patient should be avoided as much as possible. So if necessary, in case if you have to disconnect the patient for any reason, they recommend that the endotracheal tube should be clamped for a brief period of time, and the ventilator is disabled for some time to prevent aerosolization, and then you do whatever procedure that you want, and then declamp once the procedure is done. And additionally, some of the important recommendations that they have given: application of prone position during ventilation requires, as I told you, more human resources. It's important to verify if any side effects are occurring during the procedure, and it is also important to alert the staff to prevent some of the complications related to prone position. You can expect that in prone position, patient may have obstruction of the airway, and sometimes in some cases there can be worsening of the symptoms. Instead of seeing an improvement in oxygenation, in some cases when they're put in prone position, they may have desaturation. So if a patient is having desaturation in prone position, During monitoring, it is always better to put the patient back, and it is always like a trial and error method. You can try, but always prone position may not be always successful. So you can use some dedicated treatment protocols to avoid the ventilator associated pneumonia, some cross infections. A patient who is already having ARDS, other bacterial infections should be avoided. Although there is already lung damage, the patient can have other complications as well. I'm sorry, there is interruption.
Yeah, you can please proceed.
Sorry, sir, just a second. I'll just switch it off.
Yes.
Okay. So the other major complications that can occur in COVID-19 patients is critical illness, myopathy or neuropathy. This is common in patients who are uh, in hospital for several days, in intensive care units, who are having prolonged immobilization, who are on ventilator for a prolonged period of time. They can suffer with severe complications such as critical illness, myopathy and neuropathy. They can have severe weakness in the muscles. So early mobilization is required for these cases. As I mentioned earlier, to implement these early mobilization protocols, you need workforce, but there is great risk of spread of infections. Personal protective equipments are required. Every session that you give, you need personal protective equipment as you are going, in close contact with the patient. Okay, apart from nursing professionals, it's only physios who go in close contact with the positions, and with the patients in these kind of situations. All other doctors may not go very close when they're writing medications. So when you have to frequently change the position, you have to mobilize the patient. It requires that you need to take proper contact precautions, avoid this droplet spread of infections. Okay, so it's very difficult to handle in this particular situation, but there is great need for healthcare professionals, particularly physios, to implement this early mobilization protocols to prevent severe circulatory complications that could occur in these patients. And many patients, because of prolonged immobilization, they suffer with these severe complications called critical illness myopathy. Those who were in intensive care unit for more than 10 months, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, they suffer with severe ICU psychosis, neuropathy, severe muscle weakness, wasting, all this. And all these patients require a clear protocol to be followed to treat. And most importantly, nowadays, it's recommended to use lung ultrasound. There are several advantages of using lung ultrasound, as we are trying to prevent repeated use of imaging methods, avoid any severe continuous exposures to radiation hazards. The lung ultrasound has gained a lot of importance nowadays, and several practicing physiotherapists have been seen using in European countries. They're practicing lung ultrasound. They are using it for planning physiotherapy treatment. So based on the experiences, in a publication recently in Italy, they found that two different distinct patterns, pattern 1 and pattern 2, they have given some recommendations for these two distinct patterns. For pattern 1, where we see diffuse V lines, in ventilation patients, they may respond well to increased PEEP therapy. The patient is put on ventilator and PEEP can be used, or non-invasive ventilation with high PEEP can be implemented. For a patient with consolidation and parapneumonic effusions and atelectasis, with significant atelectasis, for these patients, they may respond well with prone position. So based on lung ultrasound, the treatment that you decide can be decided as per the recommendations given in this Italian study. These are the early indicators, okay, some of the recommendations that are given in this study. And apart from this, they have also recommended considering the use of prone position, PEEP titration, increasing the PEEP as per the severity of hypoxemia, using the recruitment strategies, using ventilator strategies, using PD techniques, postural drainage techniques, and monitoring the response to prone position for responders and non-responders. Who are the responders and who are non-responders? It requires more studies, how well they respond, these patients with postural drainage when they are having early pneumonic features, when there is no significant ARDS, how well they respond to the postural drainage is yet to be studied. And identify also patients when you are trying to return them back to supine position from prone position. Whether it is safe to return back them to supine position, how it has to be done gradually. We also have kinetic beds, rotator frames which are available. So gradually these kinetic beds can be used in positioning the patients to improve ventilation perfusion matching, to improve oxygenation in the affected lungs. And these techniques can be very useful if we use it judiciously, if you use it appropriately according to the patient's condition. Appropriate positioning using kinetic beds will be very useful in many of the cases. So generally, as per the recommendations in acute phase, for all patients except prone position, when a patient is on ventilator, Australian guidelines recommend use of no other techniques such as breathing exercises. They don't recommend using breathing exercises. They've not recommended using any of the other techniques such as the chest mobilization techniques that we use, inspiratory muscle training techniques. All these techniques have not been recommended by Australian guidelines when a patient is in acute phase. When a patient is in second phase or third phase, they are recommending later to use when a patient is free of this particular infection. When he's still having respiratory problems, these techniques are recommended. But in acute phase, they have not recommended using these kind of techniques, even diaphragmatic breathing exercises, pursely breathing exercises. But it is not based on any clinical trials. It's just probably, it looks like an opinion on based on the review they have recommended, and they've not given any strong recommendation, strong guidelines. It's only early recommendations that they have given. So, but still, in other review papers, that what I found, physiotherapy is still important. In terms of palliative care, preventive care, or rehabilitative care. As palliative care, when patient is having ARDS, there is risk of pressure sores, cardiovascular complications because of immobilization. All these complications can be prevented. A patient may have pain because of myalgia. A patient may have excess secretions within the lungs, which has to be removed. If it is not cleared properly, patient may have even more poor oxygenation. So palliative care is highly recommended from other reviews, what I found. And preventive care, as part of preventive care, as I mentioned, there is high probability of complications related to immobilization, which can be prevented by implementing early mobilization protocol. And later, when patient is having long-term complications because of scarring of the lung, as I mentioned, it causes interstitial lung damage. The COVID survivors will have long-term respiratory complications. You see them even after 3 months, 5 months, they are suffering with exertional dyspnea, breathing difficulty. So these patients may require long-term pulmonary rehabilitation. So there is need for more and more physios working in this area. Okay, pulmonary rehabilitation is very important for cases. You can see as there is surge in number of cases. Okay, as we are seeing unprecedented increase in number of cases, there is more scope for rehabilitation therapists to deal with complications that could occur with COVID-19, particularly the respiratory complications. Pulmonary rehabilitation is very important. In acute phase, generally what is recommended is a patient is having dyspnea, retained secretions, and complications related to immobilization. So all those patients who are in intensive care unit, conscious patients, you can give them dyspnea relieving strategies. You can give them even body positions to clear the secretions. You can even teach them some techniques which can help in clearing the secretions. This can be done using the technology. Okay, you don't have to directly contact the patient. We can use some alternative strategies like telerehabilitation. The patients may get benefited using some non-contact technical procedures, which you can give even group therapies for patients. The patients who are isolated can be contacted from the other side of the room. You can teach them some exercises, particularly conscious patients can be dealt. Okay, these are the things that you can do for patients who are in acute phase. And teaching relaxation techniques will be very helpful, as it is a severe inflammatory disease. A patient will have severe symptoms. They also suffer with severe psychological problems. Patients may require these kind of therapies, which will be very useful. Dyspnea relieving positions, pursed lip breathing may be very helpful. Again, pursed lip breathing exercise should not be given for a patient, okay, directly when he is not wearing personal protective equipment. Always you should ensure that any techniques that you are giving in directly, you should be using personal protective equipment, and also the patient should be using that. So avoid these techniques in acute phase and do not give them directly. These techniques can be tried out in indirect methods, contacting them indirectly. And respiratory muscle strengthening is strongly not recommended for the patients in acute phase, as there is increased demand on the respiratory muscles as they are suffering. It's not the right time. Later, once they recover, when the patient is not on supplemental oxygen therapy, respiratory muscle strengthening techniques can be applied. Once the patient is out of intensive care unit, when he is in acute wards, it can be used. Respiratory muscle strengthening can be given by using ventilator strategies, okay, by changing the threshold, okay, the inspiratory threshold, or some of these strategies can help in uh, weaning process. You can try it on ventilator patients, but respiratory muscle strengthening techniques generally are not prescribed in very early stages of the disease. Some of the techniques to cope up with severe dyspnea, like Buteyko breathing technique, also can be used. And again, there are no guidelines. There is no strong evidence for these kind of techniques. Again, these are the techniques which can be tried, which can help in coping up with severe breathing difficulty. So whenever you are trying to give postural drainage therapy, you need to know what are the red flags, what are the contraindications. Generally, what we follow, some of the recommendations, like when patient is having severe hemoptysis, severe chest pain, okay, and hemodynamical instability, arrhythmias. In such cases, postural drainage is not recommended. Same contraindications may be applied even for patients with COVID-19, SARS, ARDS symptoms, or once they recover, okay, or patients who are having pneumonic features with COVID-19 patients with pneumonic features. These techniques are recommended, and you need to look at the list of indications and contraindications. Same indications and contraindications may be applied. Some of the facilitation and inhibition techniques can be applied later when they are recovering. You can expect them to have pleural adhesions. The patients can have other complications such as pleural effusion, empyema. After pneumonia, the sequel of several complications can occur. So all these complications can leave not only scarring within the lung, it can cause damage even in the pleural layers. So when there is restricted pleural movement, some of the techniques to improve the pleural mobility. The chest mobilization techniques can be used later on during the recovery phase. When the patient completely recovers from the severe respiratory infection, is completely free of the virus, and after several weeks, these are the techniques that can be tried. And some of these techniques which patient can practice himself to clear the secretions can be very useful for the patients who are having difficulty in clearing the secretions, such as active cycle of breathing techniques, autogenic drainage. These are the techniques which, if patient understands it well, if patient is not having severe dyspnea, if he can follow your instructions well, these are the techniques which can be useful for them if they can practice well to clear the secretions. And of course, these are the devices which are available for single use as patient is infected. These devices, when patient is again having respiratory rate anywhere less than 30, and he is not having severe hypoxemia, is suffering with difficulty in clearing the secretions, patient can use some of these devices according to the guidelines like Acapella, RC Cornet, PEP therapy devices. These are some of the devices which can be used. And again, for all these devices which I am showing you, these are the regular chest physiotherapy devices which we use for bronchial hygiene therapy. We also have lung expansion therapy devices. These regular chest physiotherapy techniques and mobilization techniques, airway clearance devices, all these devices can be used by the patients, but there is no clear evidence. If we consider that COVID-19 also causes a regular type of pneumonia, and the ARDS is like any other type of ARDS, you can still use all these devices. The only problem with COVID-19 is the rate at which it spreads the infections. You need to be more cautious about that. So avoiding direct contact, taking all personal precautions, using personal protective equipment, you can treat these patients using all regular chest physiotherapy techniques, conventional, advanced physiotherapy techniques, what are available for us. Even inspiratory muscle training techniques will be very useful for long-term rehabilitation for cases who are having weak respiratory muscles. Okay, as part of long-term rehabilitation protocol, you can also give inspiratory muscle training for these patients. So by following general precautions, you can successfully treat patients. Although there is no clear evidence for many of the techniques, as now still the infection is spreading, they are still not able to find a vaccine. There is no cure, there is no correct treatment. Many cases, there are number of active cases are increasing, number of deaths are increasing. We can certainly see many patients suffering with severe respiratory problems. So respiratory therapy, respiratory care, cardiopulmonary physiotherapy is very important for all these patients. You can see that there is more scope and there is more importance for cardiopulmonary physiotherapy for patients with COVID-19, and there will be increased demand. We certainly have to do more work, more research in this area, and to do our best, to give our best efforts to deal with these cases. You can see that already there are about 3 million survivors, or more than about 2 million survivors, and we need to do a lot of research on these survivors, particularly those who had severe respiratory complications. Okay, what complications that they are having, how well we can give this pulmonary rehabilitation protocol, and what improvements we can see in them. More and more treatment protocols can be applied, more tools can be applied on these patients, and by giving proper therapy, we can certainly help these patients. And apart from that, telerehabilitation is a very useful strategy which we can apply. By avoiding direct contact, you can use this as a very safe and feasible alternative. You can treat large number of patients at a time. You can develop the web-based protocols, educational videos for the patients so that they can get benefited. Some of the exercises you can teach them as group therapy so that patients will get benefited. So telerehabilitation will be a very important future addition for all these COVID-19 patients. So telerehabilitation strategies also can be applied in future. So these are some of the important things that I thought of sharing with you. Hope the session was useful for you. Probably you've learned at least some important points from this. Now you can post your questions.
Yeah, you can
It will-
disconnect your screen.
Yes.
So now the session is open for the participants to ask questions or type your questions in the chat box. You can unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and then ask question. Alternatively, you can type your question in the chat box.
Hi, can I? Hello?
Yeah.
Please proceed.
Hello,
introduce
sir. Sir, this is Bhageshri.
Yeah,
Hello, sir.
Bhagesh. Yeah, tell me,
Hello.
Bhagesh, how are you?
I'm good, sir, after a long, long time. And thank you
Yeah.
so much. It was really, really
You're welcome.
helpful. I mean,
You're
in this
welcome.
situation. Just have one question. Obviously, my background is completely orthopedic, sir. So excuse if it's really silly question. So basically, if someone who has recovered from acute respiratory distress syndrome, they have gone through, they've come out of the ventilator, and they have been shifted to the wards, not yet discharged.
Okay.
Then those cases, I think you have mentioned about few devices. We can help in the airway clearance
Yes.
in those devices, but the pleural mobilization of the drainage, pleural drainage, we can't use the rehab. Is that correct or?
You can use those devices when patient is in acute wards, depending upon the patient's symptoms. If patient is having secretions, you can use one of those devices. Patient can self-administer it. So what is important here is sterilization after every use. Okay, each patient, after single use, it has to be sterilized to prevent any cross-contamination, any infections. And the respiratory muscle training device also can be used when they're having weakness. So most of the devices can be used, in the acute wards, Bhagesh.
Okay. And sir, just a last question. I think you mentioned about even if they have discharged the COVID-19 patients, they have still interstitial lung disease. They are more prone for exertional dyspnea. So
Yes.
if someone from an ortho background, like I'm talking about UK and London protocol, I work here. So if somebody who has been discharged and came to us with a MSK ailment within the 3 months, so should we be careful in prescribing a specific kind of exercises, considering that they are more prone for exertion dyspnea? Should we be adding some breathing exercises along with our normal orthopedic protocol, or?
It's always better, Bhagesh. I think, yeah. Along with your regular MSK protocol, I think it will be very important for all these patients to, to follow some of the breathing exercises. So it also depends upon other complications they're having. Say, for example, if patient is having hypertension, okay, so if you are using isometric exercises, it may cause, increased hypertension, something like this. So when it leaves permanent scarring in the lung, patient will frequently have hypoxemic episodes. Okay, he may have desaturation whenever you are giving some high resistance exercise, okay, or high intensity exercise. Whenever you're giving, he may have desaturation episodes because it depends upon the severity of the damage. Say, for example, it leaves about 10% of the damage in the lung. He may not have severe problems whenever he is doing high intensity exercise. If it causes 30% of damage in the lung, when he goes for high intensity exercise, okay, he may have hypoxemic and exertional dyspnea. So it's important to coordinate with some of these, respiratory exercises also whenever you are using regular MSK protocols. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So it's better to follow up with X-rays and all this lung complications, how well he has progressed after that. It's better to check that.
And is the X-ray a confirmatory test to know what's the percentage of lung damage, sir? Or I think you've mentioned about lung ultrasound.
You can see minimal features in chest X-ray, but you cannot see all the portions of the lung in one X-ray, even in 3 different views. So it cannot be a gold standard method, X-ray. Even for that sake, CT or MRI will give us a clear picture. but we don't have a grading scale. So lung ultrasound is a better method, but if you understand how to interpret that, it can be a handy method. It can be very useful to assess the severity of damage that it caused.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhagyashree.
Thank you.
So we have another question from Aishwarya Bandari.
Yes.
Her question is, what impact do you think monsoon is going to have on the spread of virus?
Okay, I think that is something to be answered by a public health or a community, professional who has better knowledge about it. But uh, there is no clear evidence that heat can reduce the incidence of this infection. I'm presently living in a desert. We still see a number of cases here. Okay, so I don't know whether there is a relationship that exists between this, heat. There is a relationship between summer and the COVID infection spread. Similarly, whether monsoon can increase. But generally, as a flu, if you see, the number of cases, we see with flu infections are very high in monsoon season and even in winter. So we can expect for, definitely an increase in number. If not, as a person, if I cannot say that, even according to WHO, some people, when they come out and say that we can expect an increase in number of cases when monsoon starts. Let's hope, it will not happen. The worst will be over soon, and world will see a good day, where a vaccine will come out, some treatment, medicine will come out soon, and we are expecting that the number of cases will go down even in India by end of May, according to WHO. Let's hope for the best. I cannot comment more about that.
Thank you, Dr. Kalyan. Hope Aishwarya, you got the answer for your question.
May not be exactly, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then
Yeah.
we have another question from Riya Shetty. She is a final year BPT student from KMC Mangaluru.
Okay. Yes, Riya. Go ahead.
So she has, Riya, do you want to pose questions or should I read out?
There are 2-3
can
questions
read out.
posted.
Yeah. The first question, is there a chance of relapse? And second question, how reliable is this Brescia scale?
Okay. But first question, is there a chance of relapse? According to the statistics in China, what we have, the evidence from China, there is chance of relapse. There were cases where there is reoccurrence of the infection and the respiratory symptoms also reoccurred. A patient who came COVID negative after a bout of infection, then he had a reoccurrence of the disease after a few weeks. This has happened. And this was seen, even in the newspaper, may not be in a research paper. About the second question, how reliable it is, it looks like a new scale. I have not gone through the reliability factor. I think it's important, before we use. It's a good question. I did not check the reliability of this scale, but they are using it in some of the centers, in some hospitals, to plan out the treatment. We need to check the reliability of this scale. Okay. Okay. Any other question?
Riya, hope that clarified your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Yeah.
for joining.
Hi, sir.
So-
This is Giridhar here.
Hi, Girizar. How are you?
Hi, thank you. Thank you. It was really informative session.
Thank
I just wonder how much is there any evidence of herd immunity protecting us, because herd immunity protecting us from the infection?
Hmm.
Is there any
Ho-
evidence
Hard?
herd immunity?
I don't know about that, Giridhar. I'm sorry.
Herd
Not-
immunity is mainly where people
Some-
are
yeah,
they
some-
will probably break down the lockdown so that people just be as normal as they can, so that
Oh,
they
right.
can
Okay.
more people get infection and then they get immunity developed by it.
Okay.
Because I'm looking at population in India and the density of the density of the
True,
population.
true.
Don't know how long it will be sustainable to keep them locked down.
It's it's something difficult to answer. I don't know
Yeah,
about the
I mean,
situation, what's going on. Yeah, even in developed countries, we see that, this is something beyond our control. Even
yeah.
it's something related to a government policy, probably. And, I have no comments about it. Giridhar. I have
Okay.
absolutely no idea about that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm seeing Zahara has posted a question in the chat box. Zahara, do you want to post your question? Post your question.
I can see Preeti's questions. I
Yeah.
cannot
No,
see
before
it.
that, we'll take up Zahara's.
Okay.
So her question is about tele-rehab for these patients. In the absence of devices, what treatment protocols and outcome measures do you suggest?
For tele-rehabilitation, specific outcomes, the problem with this is you need to conduct an exercise test, exercise tolerance test. You need to use a device. The best outcome is the exercise capacity. Either you're using a 6-minute walk test, or you're using a bicycle test to see an improvement. You need to estimate this endurance capacity. And the second thing, to know about improvement in the lung function, you need to do a lung function test. So using gas analyzer, you can do exercise capacity assessment. You can take the ratios, VE, VCO2 ratios, okay, from Cosmed, any of these devices, which can help us in, estimating the VO2 max and all these parameters, and health-related quality of life. For all the respiratory devices, we have health-related quality of life. SGRQ can help us. So as it is going to be a non-contact method, through tele-rehabilitation, we generally rely upon the questionnaires. The questionnaire is the best way of assessing the patient. So even for tele-rehabilitation, the best is before the treatment and after the treatment, use a questionnaire, quality of life questionnaire, something like chronic respiratory questionnaire or SGRQ. It can be helpful. Right now, we don't have a questionnaire for COVID-19 respiratory symptoms recovery pattern. So if there is something like that developed, it will be very useful. In future, probably we can hope that there will be a scale which can be developed, and that scale can be used for assessment of tele-rehabilitation. Okay.
Can I add something to that, if I can, please?
Yeah, please.
So as a part of the palliative care respiratory rehab, what we use we started a project for 2 years ago using a 2-minute walk test rather than 6 minutes, because the patients who come to us are almost kind of terminal stage of the diagnosis. So a 6-minute walk test, I mean, imagining that the COVID patients would be more or less kind of presenting a similar way, the clinical manifestation. We do a lot of telehealth from the hospice where I work in Scotland, where we use the video calls and then ask the carer or the family member to do a 2-minute walk test for us and make note of the parameters. That could be a modified Borg scale in terms of perceiving how breathless they are and the distance they covered in the 2 minutes. And thereby you do that periodically, see whether any of your interventions are helpful. And also the questionnaire that we use for terminal or kind of palliative respiratory is a tool called UCOPD for mainly COPD patients, understanding COPD. It follows a model of patient dignity inventory model of tool, which goes about physical and psychological aspects of how they are doing as well.
Yeah,
So when something that can be explored, hopefully, as well. And then we are developing a package for COVID recovering patients, a package that includes a CD with relaxation techniques to help them kind of remain calmer in terms of managing their anxiety levels, and with a few of relaxation positions that they can try to recover from when being breathless. and other chest clearance techniques, and also giving them the carer mainly because we are working remotely, and we need to ensure any aerosol generated techniques that the carers and the family members are protected from it as well. So we are sending them a kit with fluid resistant masks and gloves, and safely disposing whatever chest secretions they may have.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you for that response and giving the rejoinder for the explanation. We have Preeti, our alumnus. Welcome, Preeti, for joining this session. You can ask the questions. Hello, Preeti.
Yeah.
Preeti has got a couple of questions.
I think is it the same what Zara had asked? There is one thing about younger patients, I think.
Yes.
Patients who are younger in age but did not need an intensive care unit admission. Patients who are younger in age who did not have any respiratory problems, it was treated as an upper respiratory tract infection, will not have any respiratory problems later. So you can consider that it's completely treated and they don't require therapy after that. So I can say there is no need of any therapy for them. For the younger people, those who had respiratory infections, who suffered any lung damage, will be treated according to the severity of lung damage. So we'll use specific therapy according to the symptoms that they're having. It's the same like for an adult also, for an adult or younger age group. I think.
Can I ask one more question? Would that be okay?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
How much? Because we see that a lot more older population are getting affected by this. Is there a specific reason why? Is it because of their comorbidities, or is it because of the receptors in the lung tissue that is more prone to get affected by this, sir?
It's obviously immune response. Immunity is very weak. But at the same time, immunity is weak in children as well as pregnant women. Generally, when there is a flu infection, it affects all these three age groups.
Yeah.
Okay, if not across the lifespan, it's elderly, pregnant women, children. These three are commonly affected whenever there is an outbreak of a pandemic or epidemic like this. But this is something strange, when it broke out in China, they found that children were less affected. But now what they're saying, it's totally different. It's not the same in other countries. The children, and what they see is in some countries, children are equally affected. There were deaths reported even in children. Some pregnant women also had severe respiratory problems. So, but relatively, there is more number of elderly people for sure getting affected more, and particularly those who are having comorbidities. And what they have seen with this COVID-19, it is more of increased inflammatory response in the body. Systemic inflammation is there, and it causes multiple organ dysfunction. The death rate is high because of multiple organ dysfunction, and it's more of related to immune system in elderly population.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, is there any other questions from the participants? Okay.
So, yes.
I think there is no more questions. So we have come to the end of the session. At the outset, firstly, we would like to thank our alumnus and our colleague, former colleague, Dr. Kalyan, for having accepted our invitation to support our Global Alumni Webinar Series. Thank you so much, Dr. Kalyan, for sharing your time, spending your time with us, connecting to your alma mater, and sharing your knowledge on this trending topic with high risk of mortality. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge with all our alumnus. So, and we would also like to thank all the participants for showing the interest and sticking to the session for nearly 90 minutes. So on an average, we could see at least some 55 participants were there throughout the session. And as the session ended, some 15 have dropped out. Nevertheless, it is quite a good number, and they have remained throughout the session. So we thank each one of you for joining this webinar. So hope we'll have, and there is a link posted in this session. So please do send your feedback. This will help us to reflect on our sessions and improve the quality of such programs in the future. So thank you, Dr. Kalyan. Thank you, participants, for joining the session. So can we close the session?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Before that, I just want to say thank you for everyone. Particularly, thank you so much, Selvam sir. You organized it very well. Thank you, ma'am, for inviting me. Vaishali ma'am, if she's still there, and my regards to
Kalyan, I'm there.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Kalyan, for accepting.
Thanks and wishes to everyone, all the faculty, Maya sir, all the faculty of physiotherapy department, and thank you, Manipal, for again giving me an opportunity to interact with my ex-students. Stay safe, everyone, and my congrats and best wishes to all COVID
survivors,
frontline warriors. Frontline warriors. I can say. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you. Just as a reminder to all participants, tomorrow 11 o'clock we have got a webinar on assessing an athlete. So if time permits, please do join us. Thank you.